will just hand over to Pranay in the next seconds. Just one thing from my side, or one comment from my side. We want to record this this event. So if someone is really don't want to see himself on a video, please turn the camera off or let us know if there is a problem with that. Sometimes we get the feedback that people want to see the breakfast later because they were not able to join. And sometimes also Gabby is doing a super nice video cut if she finds time. And so just let us know if you don't want to have that. If you have any kind of question, please, perhaps while Pranay is talking, write them in the chat. We will answer them after his introduction, or just unmute yourself and ask. It should also be like an interactive event and not just someone talking. So yeah, let's start. And Pranay, the stage is yours.
Sounds good. So hi, everyone. Great to have all of you here today in this cold, freezing morning. So just a quick introduction about myself. I'm the CEO and co-founder of EnterpriseBot. We started the company now about 3.5 years ago, and we work with large enterprises mainly to kind of solve their conversational AI requirements, whether they're email, voice, chat, really how can we use artificial intelligence to kind of automate that. So that's kind of my background. We worked with companies like Generali, Suica, DHL, PwC, and many others. So feel free to ask questions, more than happy to take them. And yeah, happy for you to start. So the way Gabby and I thought that it would be interesting would be Gabby can just start with some questions that she's already got from that are kind of interesting, and then of course like we're looking forward to kind of hearing from all of you as well. So feel free to keep the questions going.
All right. So yeah, the thing is that AI is like this huge. Sometimes it's a little bit unknown for people, right? So it's kind of like a mystery, and everyone wants to know about AI. But what everyone is wondering is actually, will AI be our replacement in the near future?
So I think this is a question that's come up a lot over the last 1 year, especially, I don't know if many of you saw the Google Duplex video, where there was this AI voice talking to this Chinese restaurant with a thick, Chinese accent. And, that entire conversation really started getting people to start talking about the fact that, hey, AI is here. We've reached what basically you call general AI in our field, or basically you've reached singularity if you're into a lot of science fiction as well. And we're definitely not there, if that's the question. I think there's a lot of fear of AI, and it's really important, that's why, to understand what AI can do well and cannot do well. I'll give you an example. We work with this major Dutch financial services company. They get over 1 million requests every month. And when we started working with them, there was a lot of apprehension on the agent side, who actually handle a lot of the conversations with their customers, that, oh, is this particular tool going to replace us? How exactly is AI going to work? What can it do? And the really funny scenario over there was they actually started liking the tool. But there are two reasons to that. One, because of course it took away a lot of that, repetitive, a lot of the questions that they kept having to answer, which was kind of boring for them sometimes. So that was one interesting piece. And the second piece was the AI always went bad when there was sarcasm. And in a very funny way, that actually made them feel really good. It was like, okay, so it's good to see that AI has faults, that this particular technology is not where it can really replace a human being. When I say that, it's important to understand that I'm not saying that we won't see AI develop further, and it's not that it's not going to become much better, but it's important to really understand where we are. It's kind of like, if you saw Industrial Revolution, not saw, I mean, hopefully like we are younger than that. But if you basically have read about the Industrial Revolution, the first one, the second one, what you really kind of see is you had a lot of the same concerns. What happens whenever you have a disruptive technology is you kind of change what humans do. You kind of push humanity to its next level of growth, of its next level of what actually we should try and do. Like, are we really, like, is our brain really meant for the same routine task every day, or should we actually push ourselves to actually do more, be more creative, be more challenging in what exactly we do? Because AI today is great at understanding patterns, and it's great at looking at things that happen all the time. But when you basically throw it a curveball, for example, you suddenly start asking questions about coronavirus when COVID just came in, and it has no data set, it has no understanding of what coronavirus even means. COVID-19 is a word that just came up. It was never there in its dictionary, or it was never actually there previously. So until it learns that, you kind of have to assist it, and you have to kind of step in. And I think there is a long way for AI to go to actually even come close to what we say is replacing humans. And I don't think that's what we should see. AI is really a tool that will enhance humans. It'll really create this new workforce called the knowledge workforce, where we are really doing things that are more meaningful and that actually challenge us and actually push the boundaries a lot more. At least that's what I believe. And I'm hoping that we have a job even after AI. So, yeah.
Okay. So what you're saying is that AI pretty much is based on machine learning, and if you don't teach the machine or the AI, it won't have any base to know what's going on, right?
Correct. So AI is all about data. The way AI is
Right.
there today, it really basically takes a lot of the historical data. It understands, it tries and creates special patterns, or it interprets special patterns, which we as humans might not even be able to see. And that's really the power of AI, right? Where it can really try and look at a huge, so for example, if you know the space of natural language processing, there's a concept called word vectors. So, how exactly do words associate with each other? And then think of a billion or a trillion sentences and how each word is associated with each other. As a human, you can't even like imagine or try to think of how exactly that network looks like. And what AI is able to do is it's really able to kind of extract meaning out of these particular things, which we might not be able to do. And that's why I say, like, it's really an enhancement, or it's really something that assists us, because it can bring out these patterns, or it can basically push these things out which you might not have seen before.
So what would you say that how prevalent is AI today?
I think AI is there everywhere around us, right? Like every time you do a Google search, every time you open your email, you have, now suggested responses from Gmail. Every time you basically go onto Amazon, you go on to like buying a particular tool. Every time you speak to Siri, so it's there everywhere. And that's why I said, like, I think we don't even understand how prevalent AI is. And you and I are still there, we're still talking, we still basically have great things that we're doing. And that's what I mean by AI is really enhancing us. So every tool that we use now is getting basically AI built into it, and it's basically bringing out these insights. It's really helping us kind of uncover a lot of things that we might not have ever seen before, or would have spent hours trying to kind of collate together.
Right.
And that's why, like, it's kind of there everywhere. It's not disrupted or completely broken our lives. But at the same time, anyone who says that AI, okay, it's just a buzzword, it doesn't really exist. He just has to see the US elections of the previous term and now the next US election, which is going to happen very soon as well. And you'll kind of see that maybe it's a lot more prevalent than you think.
Right. So if we go back a little and we think, so like common people that have no clue what AI does or how does it work. For example, in my mind, that I'm not an expert, I'm always thinking, who's listening on my phone? Right? Because every single time you're having a conversation and you know that you haven't looked for something, and then after 2 hours, some sponsored ad, appears on your phone, on your social media or something. So, I mean, a lot of people think that we're also being listened, somebody's listening on my phone. Is that a myth, or is that something that is actually true?
So I can tell you we are in AI, and we have a lot of employees who really believe that there is somebody listening on the phone. We actually have an employee from Alexa. So, one day we were just having coffee and we were like, okay, I understand you have an NDA and everything, but can you tell us, is it always listening to us? And, of course, we have this feeling that there's somebody listening because AI has gotten to a point where it's able to really predict a lot. Right. So I think you were telling me about a story where you had gone, to a lake, you had seen a big balloon, you had never spoken about that particular or thing, or like, you were just talking about it, you had never searched for it. And then you saw an ad for large balloons and how you could buy them, which you found completely crazy. And, there are multiple instances where I've heard this from many people. And, that's really the power of AI, right? Like where it's actually not really listening to you, but what it is doing is it's creating a social profile of who you are. So based on your location, based on your demographic, what would have happened is the place where you were, a lot of the other people would have searched for something similar. And just because of that, it knew that, hey, I think Gabby also likes big, these huge balloons that are super like creative, cool. And why don't I show that ad to her as well? And that's really a lot to do with what AI is really powerful at. It takes this, big data concept. It takes all these different points. It's able to create a profile for you and profile of you, put you in a bucket, and then say, hey, I think I really know what exactly you're looking for. But no, like the short answer is, I don't think somebody's always listening to you, but sometimes they are. So let's keep it that way.
Okay. In that matter, for example, there's a documentary that has been really trendy. It's called the social dilemma, I believe. So it talks about how social media it's manipulating, it's been manipulating society in general. Does that has to do with AI as well, or it's just the algorithm?
Right. So again, like AI is an algorithm, right? So, to a certain extent, what AI is basically taking a lot of different data points and coming up with insights. Now, manipulating human beings or how exactly to do that, it's being done even before AI. The way it was being done was different. First you basically pushed articles in the newspaper because that's where people were there. Now with social media, you're basically pushing things over there. Now, what AI has really allowed you to do is do a lot of targeting, right? Because you can look at all these people and you can really understand, okay, what kind of bucket, like AI does a really good job of trying to come up with patterns, as I mentioned, and put you into buckets, which then you can kind of utilize. So it's, you can always use these things for good and bad. So for example, every time you go to shop online, is kind of trying to understand, okay, based on your previous preferences, I can put you in this bucket, and the most likely thing that you will do next is X. Similarly for enterprises, right? What you will also see is you do a lot of cross-selling. You use a similar technology or a similar concept where what you're doing is you're really trying to understand people and understand what actually, people really want, and then kind of doing things based on that. So you can use that for good, on your day-to-day basis on trying to increase your revenue, but of course it can be used in the negative as well.
Right. I get it. All right. So, because you just mentioned the corporation, so how can an organization use AI to bring a positive response? Pretty much, how can an organization profit from AI?
Right. So let me talk a little more about like what we are at least focused on, so I can tell you a little more about the natural processing piece for enterprises, because that's at least a space I think we understand pretty well.
Okay.
So what enterprises can definitely do is on a lot of these repetitive things that keep coming into their contact center, but not just on the contact center, whether it's email, snail mail, or even if it's basically other things that are repetitive. Those are the places you can really use artificial intelligence. So AI has become extremely strong, extremely powerful at being able to kind of help and like decipher these patterns. For example, not only can it respond today, so for example, like what we did with Generali, where all emails that come in, we are able to process 60% of them automatically. Or what basically Swika is doing in terms of any kind of question that comes in, the AI is able to kind of understand what the user really wants, tries to give that to them, is able to really understand them in their own language, in complete natural language processing, right? So that's an area where you can have huge profits, because the cost is extremely high to try and respond to these customers between 10 to 15 francs, and you're kind of dropping that to 50 rapin or 60 rapin. So there's a huge amount of ROI that you can actually bring very, very quickly using artificial intelligence. But it's not just on the response piece. It's also, let's say, if you want to cross-sell. As I mentioned, you can get a lot of insights about your customer, and then you can understand that, okay, I saw that, for example, Pranay just had a child, he added 2 people to his insurance policy. He probably needs for these particular children a new supplementary insurance as well. And I'm going to basically, kind of help him get what he needs faster. And, many times people think of this in a negative way, but honestly, what you're actually doing is you're understanding what the user's needs are, and you're trying to reduce the friction for him to actually achieve those needs. So there's a huge amount of profit, there's a huge amount of gain that you can get out of that. And what's really important to understand, though, is how can you understand the limitations of AI when you try to get this profit, right? Because as I mentioned to you, AI is not at the level. So we have a lot of companies who, basically come in and say that, okay, perfect, we want to start something, and will it be able to answer everything and do everything from tomorrow? Because it's AI, right? Like, it's smarter than humans. Like, that's what we expect. And that's where I think, you have to be a little more careful. And what AI can do really well, and where it can really bring you a lot of profits, is what are the areas where you have a lot of volume, a lot of repetitiveness, which it can basically learn from, because that's where, you have data. AI is all about data. So once you have the data, you can have a huge amount of like pattern recognition, insights, and then basically, it's limitless what exactly you can achieve from it.
Right. So you would recommend to all corporations to understand AI and to at least apply it, or try to?
So I think, we're at that point actually, at which if you don't really understand AI as a corporation, and if you haven't already started implementing it, you're already 2 years behind, right? So I think every corporation to a great extent is already doing this, and it's going to become as basic as machines in manufacturing, right? So if you don't have it, you're basically going to be left behind. So I would say it's not even an option today. It's really about how can you make sure that you utilize it in the right way, which I think is a challenge that most companies will face, because, till let's say 2 years ago, it was a buzzword, right? Everyone was talking about AI. Many people did not even completely understand what AI meant. That's why I said, like, even today, many times what people think is AI is this beautiful machine where you switch on the button and then it just solves everything, which is beautiful. And, when that iRobot scenario happens, I think we should all be afraid. Today, I think we are in a much better space to a certain degree, where, AI can really do well some things and get you millions of dollars in terms of ROI. But at the same time, the good news is it cannot replace you, at least not right now.
That's a good news. Right. So what are the biggest mistakes that an organization makes when trying to implement AI?
I think there are mainly 3 areas where we see, and again, like, I'll talk a little more about the bot topic, because I think that's where, I can add a lot more value in terms of what I know. So there are 3 major mistakes that we see companies make. The first, at the first point of failure, they basically say that, oh, it's completely failed. It's very important to understand that when you're going down an AI journey, and this is the first time you're going to take it, that you understand that AI is not perfect. AI is, as I mentioned, really good at doing 60%, but really bad at doing 40%. And it's important to build all those, deviations, build all that knowledge in it, so that you can kind of escalate it to a human at the right point, so that your customer, or you basically don't create new hurdles or new problems for yourself. That's really important. The second part is, don't think of AI as a buzzword when you actually think of implementing it. Make sure you do an end-to-end implementation. What I mean by that is, AI requires 2 things. It requires data and it requires integration. So especially if you're making a bot, right? Like, you want to automatically respond to emails, understand emails, or you want to automatically respond to chats or voice, any place, right? What's really important is that it's a completely integrated solution. Because the worst thing you can do is and AI understands. So let's say, there's a chat, a virtual assistant that you've put on your website to help your customers. You go in, one of your customers goes in and says, hey, can you help me with my latest invoice? I tried to basically look into my portal, but I couldn't find it. Now, what many times like companies do is say, sure, please go to this page and then click on this button, and there's like a 10-step manual of how exactly you can get something. And that's when actually you see AI to a certain extent fail. AI is really powerful when you integrate it. When you basically actually integrate the entire ecosystem, you have 40% higher customer experience. You, for example, might have already experienced that one time when you probably hated chatting with a chatbot. Like most people that I speak to, they've always got this, as soon as you even say the word chatbot, the thought is, oh God, like where can I basically just type and speak to an agent? And one thing that I'm really proud of is that we've been able to have over 75% satisfaction rate. And this is what we kind of drive with all our customers, that don't make FAQ long, response kind of bot, which actually does not really help anyone. A customer, when he comes, no customer wakes up in the morning and says, hey, I want to use AI or I want to use a chatbot. The customer, at the end of the day, right, all AI, bots, NLP, all these are just tools that should help you. That's the only job that they have is to assist in what you're trying to do. They're not anything by itself. The buzzword by itself has no meaning. And that's why it's really important that when you execute, you're really trying to make sure that you're executing the customer's request. So if he's asking for an invoice, or if he wants to make a payment, you make sure that he can do that end-to-end journey within that AI piece that you've offered him, because that's when you're actually going to start leveraging the value. So, that broken system that, hey, actually we just give, textual responses, very strongly, like we would recommend against it. And we actually have seen most companies, they actually fail when they try to do it, in that particular way.
Okay, so I think that this clears up the air, or the fear that a lot of people have towards AI. So, okay, so do you think that it's a good time for us to ask our guests? We have 50 people listening, so thank you so much. If you have any questions for Pranay, just feel free and we'll just read it out loud for everyone to hear. So let's wait for that.
Yeah, there is a first question.
Yeah.
From Pietro, what is your view on regulation around AI to be provocative? On one side, human body slavery, so sorry, is illegal. And on the other side, trade of human brain seems to be a free market. Some rules can also help to put some boundaries around the good and bad use of AI.
I think, that's an interesting point, and it's good to see that we've already hit slavery early in the morning. So that's always nice in a conversation. Our data, that's a big topic.
Since we need to remove fear, let's start with slavery, right?
Right.
Even if I didn't know, Pietro, you had asked the question, I would have just imagined it was you, for some reason. No, but, going back to the point about AI and its efficacy and, is it really the right thing? There's this huge concept of GDPR that, of course, has come in, which actually has a huge influence on AI as well. And I actually think Europe has got that right, and US has not actually understood it well enough or has not reacted well enough to this. I think it's really important that users define what can be done with their data. And to your point about, for example, our brains, for example, are being traded. If you as an individual would like to retain your data, you should have the right to do that. I very strongly believe that. But at the same time, if we as a society believe that, hey, if we all given something, we're actually getting more out of it, more back out of it, then I think that's fair as well. So I really think it is an individual approach, and you should have the right to make that decision. Again, to a certain extent, if you go back to industrial revolution, the second industrial revolution, I know sometimes you might think that, okay, these are two completely separate things, that was the machine, while this basically is not really a physical machine, this is more of a mental machine, and that's more threatening to us to a certain extent. But it's not really that different, because at that point, you had people who were specialists at creating certain products, and then you took their knowledge, you learned their knowledge, and you tried to basically kind of create automated systems. And then you were able to overall lift what humanity could do and what humanity could achieve. And I very strongly believe that AI has the same potential. So I don't really go for the idea that you're really kind of pushing humans into slavery. I actually think you're removing humans from slavery, where they're kind of getting out of doing the same mundane task over and over again to actually try and challenging their brain and trying to do something much more. So slightly different opinion over there, Pietro, sorry.
All right, we have another question. Andrea asks, when do you think AI will become too much?
I know there are many, predictions out there, and your guess is probably as good as mine. When exactly do we have general AI? When do we actually have this point where, AI just takes over the world? I would be surprised, to be honest, if it happens in our lifetime. That does not mean AI is not going to have a huge impact on our lifetime. It's going to have an insane amount of impact on our lifetime. Just the way you had to change what trades you did 60 years ago when you had a lot of manufacturing kind of change, you're going to have a lot of change in terms of how you work on a day-to-day basis, because AI is going to kind of really push the boundaries or push you to learn more and learn faster. We're really in a time where you have to upskill yourself. You will have to kind of change how you actually do your job, because if it's very easy to do and if it's something that's replicable, AI really is going to kind of take up a lot of that. And that's why it's really important that most of us kind of understand how can we leverage it? How can we actually use it rather than be scared of it?
All right. Manuela, she asks, okay, hold on. You mentioned before that AI won't replace our jobs, at least not now. Would that implied it could be possible in the future? But how you judge on emotional intelligence? Could AI really replace it?
Again, really good point. So I'll take the second part first. On the emotional intelligence part, I think that's where AI is the weakest. I'm not saying that it will remain weak, but to a certain extent, it is very weak over there, because each person is different, and of course, again, like to a certain extent, all of us are similar as well. So, is it possible that with enough data points, AI could also become good at emotional intelligence? It is possible. I don't know if you've seen some of the new facial recognition technology out there, which can also read your emotions based on your facial expressions. So it is picking up on emotional intelligence as well. But even today, the most sophisticated AI out there cannot understand sarcasm. Like something that, you would think, hey, come on, how hard is it? It actually is pretty hard, because if you actually think about it, sarcasm is not anything by itself. It has so many different things around it. Sarcasm is interesting or it's funny because of all the context around it. And until AI becomes strong enough, because sometimes we underestimate our human brain. We underestimate how complex our human brain is, how many different data points actually influence us. With all these concepts of neural network, we don't even have 5% of the same amount of power. With the most, expansive AI machine out there, we still don't even capture 5% of the same power that a human brain does, right? So we're far, far away, and I really don't think AI will really be able to replace us, at least in our lifetime. Or at least that's my hope. So let's see. Our children, let's see. Like, I think they're going to have it a little harder than us, but yeah.
Okay. Okay, so there's another question. There's actually a lot of questions. Oliver asks, do you like to use bots?
Yeah, again, goes back to what I said before, that there are some bots that I would hate. And, even I don't get up in the morning and say, hey, I want to try a bot. Sometimes I do, because I want to see what exactly competitors are doing, but rarely that's the case, right? Like, what even I want to do is just get a response. When bots are well integrated and they solve my problem, if I can get out, so I was basically on call with Swiss for about 45 minutes because I wanted to make one small change on my ticket and it was not happening online. If a bot could do that in 10 seconds, which it should be able to do, I would be so much happier. I would love to use a bot. But when it's not integrated, when all it does is, hey, sorry, I cannot help you. Here's a phone number. Now please call this. I don't think anyone wants that experience. And that's why, the implementation is key. The buzzword isn't enough. How well you implement it, how powerful it is really what will actually bring the value.
Okay. Okay, Sammy asks, hello, can we have a simulation of your solution?
So I could, but I don't know if you want to complete the questions first, and then I'm happy to kind of go.
Of course. Yeah. Okay, next
so
question.
We can go to Swika's website, or we can go on to one of those, and I'm happy to kind of show one of those, or show a video. But
awesome.
Yeah, happy to do that.
Okay, so next question would be from Gregor. How do you measure that if you say user experience was improved by 40% by integrated systems?
Yeah, so this is something that we do a lot of A/B testing, right? Because this is kind of our focus area. We really try to understand what do users expect, what actually works well, what doesn't work well, right from integrations to smart UI to suggestions. Each and everything that we try to introduce, we do a lot of A/B testings. Probably we would have done at least 1,000 experiments till now throughout our journey. This particular 40% comes from 3 client experiments, 3 real clients, where what we did was we first basically introduced an FAQ bot because that was the fastest. So of course, every company wants to do that first. As soon as we got the data about what areas are repetitive and what areas are problematic, so while basically this was going on, we were collecting user feedback. So after the end of any of your conversations, you can leave a positive, negative, or a neutral smiley. So you get data feedback on, okay, are customers happy? Once we introduced the integration, we actually saw the number of positive smileys, the nice, green, big grin, actually increased by 40%, actually 43%, in some cases 38. So we just averaged it to 40. And that's how we come up with that number, that 40% higher user experiences. So we were having a conversation with Gartner, on the overall field, and they gave a similar number in terms of, integrated solutions significantly outperform non-integrated solutions in terms of client experience and satisfaction.
Okay. All right. Another question. This is from Trek. What are the boundaries of AI? COVID, corrupted data, etc. He has actually asked 2 questions, and the other one is, what are the most common terms of AI everybody should know? And another question. Yeah. What is the strategy of EV for the future?
Cool. Let me try and take each one separately.
Yeah.
The boundaries of AI, as I mentioned, AI is mainly about 2 things. One, data. So you put corrupted data over there, or COVID-19, which basically would be an anomaly data point. All these things, like AI, as I keep trying to stress, and the reason I keep trying to stress is because I think it's very important for people to understand this. AI is really good when it can understand patterns, when it sees large amounts of data. When it does not see large amounts of data, whether for example, so sometimes enterprises get scared that, okay, we don't have that data. So for example, most companies don't have chat, so we cannot have that data. But then you have to create it. You have to kind of create data based on historical concepts or in historical reports, and that's something we of course help companies to do. But what's important is that you do have that data set that can train your AI, whether created based on what you already know, and then you can kind of create good synthetic data, or whether it is all based on real data. And of course, real data is always better. But that is definitely one of the limitations. And the second limitation is AI by itself is nothing. AI is good if you know what you're going to do with it. So, for example, can a bot execute? Or if basically you have insights, do you actually execute on strategies based on those insights? AI can only surface patterns or understand what the user wants. At the end of the day, it's important to make sure that that is matched with some action, because otherwise, what actually is coming out of that conversation? Going to the second one, what are the most common terms of AI everyone should know?
Mm-hmm.
I think there are many, but I think for business users, AI, so there is, at least, in the tech community, there's this funny saying, AI was written in PowerPoint while, machine learning was written in Python. So just remember that machine learning, NLP, AI, many times are interoperable. And what all these means is you're basically allowing a machine to kind of understand data. So machine learning, deep learning, all these are just different ways to kind of conduct AI, or different, let's say, setups of AI that kind of do a similar thing, which is to kind of look at your data and try and be the best at understanding and interpreting that data. So I think those two would be, few of the most common ones. And another one, again, like depends on if you look at the data, I would call overfitting is extremely important. Overfitting is when you actually have your data on a sample size. So let me give you an example. Let's say you're a credit card company and all your questions that you train your AI on are just one: how much do I owe on my credit card, right? And then when you test it on the same question, it has 100% response rate, like 100% accuracy, because that's all you trained it for. But you ask it another question and then it has a 0% accuracy because you've done something called overfitting. Now, of course, simplifying the concept, but I think that's another concept that it's very important if you want to go into actually learning about how AI works, and what exactly you're training. Another, like, there are other things, but again, really on the high level, I think it's more important, rather than all the buzzwords, just to understand that AI is all about understanding from data and understanding patterns from that data, but you need to have enough of it. That's, I think, one of the most core things that I would recommend. What is the strategy of enterprise bot for the future? What we as a company have seen is, as I mentioned, at the start, it was all about, okay, can we understand the user? And we've seen that it's more and more important that we don't just understand the needs of the user, but actually allow companies to execute on those needs. So what we are really focusing on is, we've already built, and have just launched it in an alpha stage with some of our customers, where the NLP gives data points, which goes into our no-code platform, where again you can kind of show what actions you want to take, how you want to enrich data, how you want to utilize that data, and then you can integrate that into your core systems, or you can integrate that with an RPA like UiPath or Blue Prism or anything else. So that's really an area that we have moved into. Another area that we're really focused on is the voice of customer. So now what we are also doing is trying to highlight problems before companies even know those are problems. For example, we work with a lot of rail companies in the UK and in Switzerland and Netherlands. We try to gather insights about what problems people are facing. For example, let's say there is a huge peak in train delays, and people are super dissatisfied because of that. We're able to kind of push that. Or the food was really bad on the train. We're able to kind of gather these insights, show where exactly that negative sentiment is really like peaking from, and allow companies to again basically take actionable insight. That's really important, that it's actionable, and that's something that we're really focused on.
Okay, thank you.
Gabriela, do you mind if I ask my question directly?
Of course, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So thanks, Pranay, for all of your explanation. I will have two questions for you, because I'm not an expert on AI, but I'm quite curious on it.
Sure.
So for myself, I'd like to know, which industry do you think will benefit most about AI? For example, is it more likely the financial industry, the insurance industry, the health industry? And the second question that I have is relative to the impact of AI and the fact that, as you mentioned, sometimes you are using a lot of data and you try to detect some patterns. And if sometimes we are not misleading, so we thought we can understand something, but at the end, we don't understand it. For example, I will take the financial crisis and the fact that sometimes you use some machine learning to take your position and to do some investment. But at the end, you just realize that you didn't plan the black swan and you just lose everything in one bet. So that kind of two questions. Thank you.
So let me take the first question first about the industries that get impacted. I think the industries that will get impacted first will, of course, be the high volume industries. So whether, for example, it is retail banking, whether it is retail insurance, whether it is railway customer support. But again, you're going to see some parts of it get impacted. It's never going to be where you actually see the entire industry as a whole get impacted, but it'll be certain functions that are highly repetitive that will actually get impacted the most. So for example, you might see to a great extent where in insurance, actuaries are required lesser, or their role changes to a certain extent because risk assessment is now being done by AI. Those are areas that are possible. Similarly, in accounting, for example, it is possible that you see more and more that all your data is already aggregated and can already come up with what exactly your balance sheet should look like. So those are things that you're going to see more and more. The things that are repetitive, the things that can kind of be mapped out into rules, or you can kind of create patterns out of, definitely that's where you're going to see the most impact. Areas of high luxury value items, that's where you're going to see the least amount of impact. So for example, we do not expect a brand like, I don't know, Louis Vuitton to kind of start using any kind of automated response system, because that would go against what exactly the brand values are. Similarly, when it comes to high net worth individuals in wealth management, you're probably not going to try and automate a lot of that. You really want that personal connection. So wherever you want empathy, wherever you want a lot of personalization, you definitely want to kind of keep it more human. You want to try and always use AI where it is volumes, it's basically repetitive, and you can actually get the most amount of ROI as well. Did I miss any of your questions, or did I?
No, that was good. That was a good answer. This is what actually I was looking as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Cedric, for speaking up. We also have another questions. One from Michael. He asks, since AI requires a lot of data and data has become a commodity, when do individuals start getting paid for it?
Again, I think there is a huge business that you're going to actually see come out of data, and individuals having the right to their own data and selling that data. It's slowly happening. You've already started some companies go into that field. I very strongly believe, especially with the way GDPR has been structured, you actually have a huge opportunity there. I expect that in the next 5, maximum next 10 years, you will really have the ability to choose who gets your data and what you get paid for that data. There'll be a complete marketplace for that. And sometimes you might see it in terms of rewards. You might not see it directly as cash. Sometimes you might see it as direct cash rewards, but you'll really start seeing that there is a compensation for that data. I would be surprised if you don't see it actually in the next 5 years.
All right. Juliet has a question as well. What about bias? No, how to pronounce that?
Bias, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Since data collection is never perfect, is there a risk that AI could never get a real picture of the reality and create bias models for everyday problem resolutions?
Again, a very good question. And actually, that's one of the biggest problem areas of AI. As I mentioned, AI is all about data. But what if your data already has bias, which a lot of data does? I'm not sure how many of you followed what happened with the Apple Goldman Sachs credit cards, where women actually had, I believe, 15% higher interest cost compared to men, just because they were women, not because of their financial standing, not because of their historical banking data, nothing. Just because the data inside was biased. And there was this huge uproar in the US where, for example, there was a husband and wife that shared the same bank account, right? Nothing else, no other credit history that was actually provided. And based on that, the husband got a lower interest score and the wife actually got a higher interest. And obviously this made people extremely mad. And Goldman Sachs and Apple came back and said, hey guys, we're sorry. It was an AI algorithm that we utilized to come up with this. We of course understand there was a bias and we need to factor that in. Or if you've seen Minority Report, how it actually, sometimes you can come up with biases based on data. Or, if you've also looked at some of the crime statistics in the police network, where you have over policing based on historical data, which creates additional new problems in terms of people feeling safe, etc. Right? So this is a huge problem. There is no hiding from it. There is no getting away from it. And actually, the more we talk about it, the more we understand it, the better we'll be able to factor that in. There are many companies who are focused just on this problem, which is how do we do bias analysis and how do we extract biases from our data, whether it's about color, whether it's about gender, whether it's about ethnicity. How can we try and understand these biases and try and mitigate them? Because let's be honest here, humans, we are biased, right? The way we interact with each other is biased. And what the AI is doing is it's learning from our interactions with each other. So to a great extent, AI is showing the same flaws that humans do. And of course, we want it to be better. And for that, it's about talking about the problem, whether it's, amongst ourselves about our own biases, or whether in the field itself. I think in both places, it's as important.
Okay, Stefan mentions for better understanding ML to AI approach, it would be helpful to have a concrete best practice example in insurance context, also to imagine enterprise spot strengths.
So document recognition, claims
document recognition, policies, claims, fraud detection, invoices, pictures, maybe combine it with a demo.
I'm just trying to see if I have, let me just try and see if I can pull up a video. I will make sure the next time I do a setup like this, I will have a few demos ready for you guys.
Perhaps while searching, Pranay, can you answer the question of Sami? Is your bot can use natural language?
Right. So absolutely. We use natural language processing and artificial intelligence to understand what a user wants. If you would like to just, test it out or see how it works, you can go to SBB's website or Suica's website, go onto the contact form, and you if you see a chat, you'll basically be talking to our AI. In SBB, it's with the German, and with Suica, it's all languages. Also, if you email generally, you'll also see the AI in action. But the only thing is right now we're not responding automatically, so you might not see actually the AI at work. What I can do, if that makes sense, is just send across a few links, which we can distribute after this call with a few video examples, because unfortunately, for some reason, I can't find something that I can show right now. Does that work?
They put you on the spot.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you can just put the links in the chat, then people can grab them and take them with them and have a whole day of enterprise bot experience.
Learning. Yeah.
We also have a last question of Ruth. When does AI integrate with biotech, and is this already happening? And what's your view? A threat or an opportunity? Sorry, it's in such a color that it's difficult to read.
I think, again, in biotech as well, you're seeing AI kind of play a role. So, for example, if you just look at, the entire debacle or, the craziness we had around COVID, you actually saw a lot of biotech firms try and use AI to understand what's the fastest way they could come up with the right medicine. Now, how effective was that? And, for example, did AstraZeneca or any of these actually get results through AI? That's not very public at this point, but, there are multiple papers and multiple concepts out there talking about how actually, right from gene sequencing, you're actually really using AI in biotech as well. It's definitely a field, when it comes to biotech, when it comes to, life in general, I definitely would say that it is a risk always, but at the same time, it's not something that you should shy away from, but don't push it out into the public without having the right framework and the right tests either. For example, we already know what happened when a company in the US tried to push, one drop of blood, and then we can kind of understand everything about you, whether you're going to get cancer, all of that. Those are things that you really don't want to kind of push and not claim that AI can do until you really verify it and test it. And I think especially when it comes to life, when it comes to biotech, it's important that you have the right amount of testing and frameworks in place, and it's not, you don't take the same risks as you would, for example, when it comes to, just technology or conversations.
Okay, so there's a final question from Sammy again. Thank you for earlier answers. Do you integrate with CRM for sales, pre-sales process?
Yeah, so we already integrate with Zendesk, Freshdesk. We right now are in talks with BSI CRM on the health insurance side as well for integration for one of our clients. We also integrate with Microsoft Dynamics. What we really see is we want to be the brain that understands. So whether it's, for example, one of the points was around documents, whether it's emails, whether it is chat, we really want to be the natural language processing brain, which understands what's going on, what's actually in there, and then we allow you to consume that from any other application. And we basically integrate with almost any CRM, including Salesforce.
Great. All right, so that's it for the question round. So is there anything else we want to touch base on?
I'm going to quickly try and find the links so that I can actually post them to them.
In the meantime, I want to say thank you to all the participants and attendees. This has been very insightful for all of us, special to talk about AI and everything that entails to us is very important. So thank you so much, Pranay, to open up a little our brains and our minds on this important topic that today is very, very trendy.
Yeah, also thank you very, very much from my side, and also thank you for having us asking all these questions. And yeah, great meetup. Where is the coffee, by the way? Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have an AI delivering coffee, but that's also one of the restrictions of COVID, that you have to have.
You need to bring your own. Yeah, bring your own coffee.
But we are looking forward to the day where we can do this breakfast live, and then we invite you to come all to the garage and to join us to have a coffee or even a beer in the evening and sit together. We are all missing that. But it's great to see the community here online joining us and interacting with us. So also, if you have any questions to Pranay or to HITS or to one of us, please contact us, and we are always open for any discussion and any interaction.
I'm just putting my email, and what I will do is also put in the links over here for the videos. And if any of you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Cool.
All right. Okay, let's wait for you to put just to add the links.
Yep. I've just asked my team to send me some links.
Okay. Before closing the meeting.
We didn't know that people really want to see that.
Yeah, next time, Pranay, we would need to prepare something visual and show them straight away.
No, absolutely. No, my fault over there. Sorry about that.
No worries.
No problem. No, we are learning how it works. And
yeah, I think because of this mystery that evolves around AI, everyone's very curious about how it works. So next time, we will have something prepared for all of you.
Yeah, so, or please think about a best practice discussion. I think machine learning and AI is so a wide area and range. And I think it's helpful to learn by an example, a practice, to understand the points Pranay said. So it's all about data, algorithm, but it needs somehow a concrete demand to step in these points. And then the learning curve will be great. But I think it's also a hint for you, maybe some best practices, and then a good discussion about the value and finally the maturity of the approach.
So Pranay, you have to be the guest speaker at one of our
we have to do it
breakfasts. I
again.
see that. You do it too good, so you have to do it again.
Happy to do it, and definitely we can show a lot more demos. To be honest, I tried to stay away from the demos because I didn't want it to become a marketing session for our company. But no, I completely understand how actually it could have been very helpful to get a better perspective on it.
Cool.
Okay, thank you very much. I have to leave. Bye.
Thank you for joining. All right, so there are the links, so everyone can just go to the chat box and just take a look on the links that Pranay just shared in case you had the same questions as before. So I think that's our time.
You can also ask us if you don't able to grab the link. We are here.
Yeah. All right, so I believe our time is up. Thank you so much, Pranay, and I believe I talk for everyone here at HITS. We are so glad to have you. And as everyone requested, I think this is we're going to need a part 2 of To Bot or Not.
To Bot or Not part 2.
Yes. All right.
So
thank you, everyone.
Lugano.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you and happy Friday.
Bye-bye. Happy Friday.
Friday, yeah.